Fanfic Corner, presented by Jennifer. Mercy Thompson. Book 1, Moon Called. Chapter 3, Part 1. I slipped through the office and opened the outside door cautiously, but the smell of perfume and herbs hanging in the night air told me we were still all right. A dark Cadillac was stretched across the pavement just beyond Stefan's bus. I pushed the door all the way open as the uniformed chauffeur tipped his hat to me, then opened the car's back door, revealing an elderly woman. I stuck my head back into the office and called, "It's all right, Mac, just the cleanup crew." Keeping the humans ignorant of magic that lives among them is a specialized and lucrative business, and Adam's pack kept the best witch in the Pacific Northwest on retainer. Rumors of Elizabeth's origins and how she came to be in the Tri-Cities changed on a weekly basis. I think she and her brood of grandchildren and great-grandchildren encouraged the more outrageous versions. All that I knew for certain was that she had been born in Moscow, Russia, and had lived in the Tri-Cities for at least 20 years. Elizabeth rose from the depths of the big car with all the drama of a prima ballerina taking her bow. The picture she made was worth all the drama. She was almost 6 feet tall and little more than skin and bones, with a long, elegant nose and gray, penetrating eyes. Her style of dress was somewhere between Babshka and Baba Yaga. Layers of rich fabric and textures came down to her calves, all covered with a long wool cape and a worn scarf that wrapped around her head and neck. Her outfit wasn't authentic. At least not to any period or place that I've heard of, but I've never seen anyone brave enough to tell her so. "Elizabeth Everton, welcome," I said, walking past the bus to stand by her car. She scowled at me. My Adam calls me and tells me you have one of his wolves dead." Her voice had the crispness of a British aristocrat, so I knew she was angry. Her usual accent was thick enough that I'd have to make a real effort to understand her. When she was really angry, she didn't speak English at all. "Werewolf, yes," I agreed, "but I don't think it's one of Adam's." Adavan, I had learned, was the affectionate form of Adam. I don't think she'd ever call him that to his face. Elizabeth was seldom affectionate to anyone likely to overhear her. "I have the body in my shop," I told her, "but there is blood all over here. The werewolf chased me with a torn artery and bled from here all the way to the storage facility, where he tore up the fence in 2 places before he bled to death on the street. The storage facility has cameras, and I used Stefan's bus, I pointed to it, to move the body. She said something in Russian to her chauffeur, who I recognized as one of her grandchildren. He bowed and said something back before going around to open the trunk. "Go," she told me, and flung her arms in a pushing gesture. "I will take care of the mess out here without your help. You wait with the body. Adam will be here soon. Once he is seen, he will tell me what he would have me do with it. You killed the wolf with a silver bullet, so I should look for casing? With my fangs," I told her. She knew what I was. It was sort of an accident. At least his death was. She caught my arm when I turned to go into the office. "What were you thinking, Mercedes Thompson? A little wolf who attacks the great ones will be dead soon, I think. Luck runs out eventually." "He would have killed a boy under my protection," I told her. I had no choice. She released my arm and snorted her disapproval, but when she spoke, her Russian accent was firmly in place. "There's always a choice, Mercy, always. If he attacked a boy, then I suppose it must not have been one of Adam's." She looked at her chauffeur and barked out something more. Effectively dismissed, I went back to Mac and our dead werewolf. I found Mac crouched near the body, licking his fingers as if he might have touched the drying blood and was cleaning them off. Not a good sign. Somehow I was pretty certain that if Mac were fully in control, he wouldn't be doing that. "Mac?" I said, strolling past him and over to the far side of the garage where we'd been sitting. He growled at me. "Stop that," I said sharply, doing my best to keep the fear out of my voice. "Control yourself and come over here. There are some things you should know before Adam gets here." I've been avoiding a dominance contest because my instincts told me that Mac was a natural leader, a dominant who might very well eventually become an alpha in his own right. And I was a woman. Women's liberation hadn't made much headway in the world of werewolves. A mated female took her pack position from her mate, but unmated females were always lower than males unless the male was unusually submissive. This little fact had caused me no end of grief growing up as I did in the middle of a werewolf pack. But without someone more dominant than he, Mac wouldn't be able to take control of his wolf yet. Adam wasn't there, so it was up to me. I stared at him in my best imitation of my foster father and raised an eyebrow. "Mac, for heaven's sakes, leave that poor dead man alone and come over here." He came slowly to his feet, menace clinging to him. Then he shook his head and rubbed his face, swaying a little. "That helped," he said. "Can you do it again?" I tried my best. "Mac, get over here right now." He staggered a little drunkenly over to me, then sat at my feet. "When Adam comes," I told him firmly, "whatever you do, don't look him in the eye for longer than a second or two. Some of this should be instinct, I hope. It isn't necessarily to cower. Remember that you've done no wrong at all. Let me talk. What we want is for Adam to take you home with him." "I'm fine on my own," Mac objected, sounding almost like himself. But he kept his head turned towards the body. "No, you're not," I said firmly. If there wasn't a pack, you might survive. But if you run into one of Adam's wolves without being made known to the pack, they'll probably kill you. Also, the full moon is coming soon. Adam can help you get control of your beasts before then." "I can control the monster?" Mac asked, stilling. "Absolutely," I told him. "And it's not a monster, any more than a killer whale is a monster. Werewolves are hot-tempered and aggressive, but they aren't evil." I thought about the one that had sold him and corrected myself. "At least, not any more evil than any other person." "I don't even remember what the beast does," Max said. "How can I control it?" It's harder the first few times, I told him. A good alpha can get you through that. Once you have control, then you can go back to your old life if you want. You have to be a little careful. Even in human form, you're going to have to deal with having a shorter temper and a lot more strength than you're used to. Adam can teach you. I can't ever go back, he whispered. Get control first, I told him. There are people who can help you with the rest. Don't give up. You're not like me. Nope, I agreed. I'm a walker. It's different from what you are. I was born this way. I never heard of a walker. Is that some sort of fae? Close enough, I said. I don't get a lot of the neat things that you werewolves have. No super strength, no super hearing, no pack. No chance you might eat your friends, he suggested. I couldn't tell if he was trying to be funny or if he was serious. There are some benefits, I agree. How did you find out so much about werewolves? I opened my mouth to give him the short version, but then decided the whole story might better serve to distract him from the dead body. My mother was a rodeo groupie. I began sitting beside him. She liked cowboys, any cowboy. She liked a Blackfoot bull rider named Joe, Old Coyote from Browning, Montana, enough to get pregnant with me. She told me that he claimed to come from a long line of medicine men, but at the time she thought he was just trying to impress her. He died in a car accident 3 days after she met him. She was 17, and her parents tried to talk her into an abortion, but she would have none of it. Then they tried to get her to put me up for adoption, but she was determined to raise me herself. Until I was 3 months old, and she found a coyote pup in my crib. What did she do? She tried to find my father's family, I told him. She went to Browning and found several families there with that last name, but they all claimed they'd never heard of Joe. He was certainly Native American. I made a gesture to encompass my appearance. I don't look purebred. My features are too Anglo. But my skin looks too tan even in November, and my straight hair is as dark as my eyes. But otherwise, I don't know much about him. Old Coyote, said Max suspectively. I smiled at him. Makes you think this shifter thing must have run in the family, doesn't it? So how was it that you were raised by werewolves? My great-grandfather's uncle was a werewolf, I said. It was supposed to be a family secret, but it's hard to keep secrets from my mother. She just smiles at people and they tell her their life stories. Anyways, she found his phone number and called him. Wow, says Mac. I never met any of my great-grandparents. Me either, I said, then smiled. Just an uncle of theirs who was a werewolf. One of the benefits of being a werewolf is a long life. If you can control the wolf. But Adam could explain that part better than me. His gaze was drawn back to our dead friend. Well, yes, I sighed. Stupidity will get you killed. Will still get you killed. My great-grandfather's uncle was smart enough to outlive his generation, but all those years don't keep him from getting gutted. Didn't keep him from getting gutted by a moose while he was out hunting one night. Anyways, I continued, he came to visit and knew as soon as he saw me what I was. That was before the Fae came out and people were still trying to pretend that science had ruled out all the possibility of magic. He convinced my mother that I'd be safer out in the hinterlands of Montana being raised by the Mercrow's pack. They have their own town in the mountains where strangers seldom bother them. I was fostered with a family there who didn't have any children. Your mother just gave you up? My mother came out every summer and they didn't make it easy on her either. Not overly fond of humans, the Mercrow accept their own spouses and children. I thought the Mercrow was a wolf who ruled North America. Packs sometimes take public names from their leaders, I told him, so the Murkrow's pack called themselves the Murkrow. More often, they find some geographical feature in their territory. Adam's wolves are the Columbian Basin pack. The other pack in Washington is the Emerald City pack in Seattle. Mac had another question, but I held up my hand for him to quiet. I heard Adam's car pulling up. Remember what I said about the Alpha, I told Mac, and stood up. He's a good man, and you need him. Just sit there, keep your eyes down, let me talk, and everything will be all right. The heavy garage door of Bay 1 groaned and then rang like a giant cymbal as it was forced all the way open faster than it usually moved. Adam Humptman stood at the open doorway, stillness cloaking his body, and for an instant I saw him with just my eyes, as a human might. He was worth looking at. For all his German last name, his face and coloring were Slavic. Dusty skin, dark hair, though not as dark as mine. Wide cheekbones and a narrow but sensual mouth. He wasn't tall or bulky, and a human might wonder why all eyes turned to him when he walked into a room. Then they'd see his face and assume, wrongly, that it was attraction. Adam was an alpha, and if he'd been ugly, he would have held the attention of anyone who happened to be nearby, wolf or human. But the masculine beauty he carried so self-consciously didn't hurt. Under more unusual circumstances, his eyes were a rich chocolate brown, but they had lightened with his anger until they were almost yellow. I heard Mac gasp when the full effect of Adam's anger hit him, so I was prepared and let the wave of power wash over me like seawater on glass. Maybe I should have explained matters better when I had him on the phone. But where was the fun in that? What happened? He asked, his voice softer than the first snowfall of winter. It's complicated, I said, holding his gaze for a full 2 seconds before I turned my head and gestured towards the body. The dead one is there. If he belongs to you, he's new, and you haven't been doing your job. He was as deaf and blind as a human. I was able to take him by surprise, and then he was too ignorant to realize that the wound wouldn't close as fast as usual if it was given by a paranatural creature. He let himself bleed out because he was too caught up in the chase to "Enough, Mercedes," he growled, as he strolled over to the dead wolf man and knelt beside him. He moved the body, and one of the corpse's arms flopped limply on the ground. Mac whined eagerly, then bowed his head and pressed it against my thigh so that he couldn't see. The sound drew Adam's attention from the body to the boy at my feet. He growled, "This wasn't one of mine, and neither is that." "So gracious," I said. "Your mother should be complimented on your manners, Humptman." "Careful," he whispered. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. Okay, he was scary. Really scary. He'd probably have been scary even when he was just human. But it wouldn't do to let him know he intimidated me. "Adam Humptman," I said politely to show him how it was done. "Allow me to introduce you to Mac. That's all of his name I know. He was attacked by a werewolf in Chicago about 2 moons ago. The werewolf killed his girlfriend, but he survived. He was taken by his attacker and put in a cage. A man who sounded a lot like the Chicago Alpha Leo sold him to someone who held him inside a cage in a semi-trailer and used him for what sounds like some sort of drug experiment until he broke free. Last Friday, he showed up at my door looking for work."